In episode 25, Monitor Logs with Intent and Respond to Signals, we anchor on a simple promise that matches the payment card industry professional PCIP exam lens. Timely detection comes from purposeful logging and disciplined follow-through that produces evidence you can verify. Monitoring is not about collecting everything. It is about deciding which events tell the story of risk and then proving, with artifacts, that those events are captured, protected, reviewed, and acted upon. The Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI-DSS, expects controls that reduce the time between cause and discovery, and the assessor's job is to recognize design choices that make that interval short and predictable. You are not configuring a tool. You are evaluating whether a program can spot misuse quickly and demonstrate the path from signal to outcome without guesswork. Throughout this episode, we will keep the focus on adequacy, traceability, and the end-to-end chain of who saw what, when they saw it, and how the organization responded in a way that stands up to scrutiny. Time is the common language of investigations, so standardizing timestamps, time synchronization, and formats is not a convenience, it is a control. If one system writes local time, another writes coordinated universal time, UTC, and a third switches time zones with daylight shifts, correlation decays into guesswork, which lengthens response and weakens evidence. An assessor looks for a clear standard such as UTC everywhere, Network Time Protocol NTP, sources defined and monitored, and log formats that include precise, unambiguous timestamps with time zone indicators and millisecond resolution where feasible. Format consistency matters just as much. Structured logs in a predictable schema let queries join events across platforms without brittle parsing tricks. In an exam scenario, the right answer emphasizes that synchronization is not nice to have. It is required for reliable sequence analysis and for proving that a control operated before a loss, not after it. Without shared time, you cannot prove order, and without order, you cannot prove causality. Critical fields turn logs from noise into narrative, and the assessor verifies that these fields actually appear in the records that matter. At minimum, entries should identify the user or service principal, the action requested, the object or resource targeted, the outcome or response code, the origin, such as source IP or device identifier, and any correlation handle that connects multi-step flows. Applications should record the business actor as well as the technical account, because shared middleware identities do not tell you which person approved a refund or exported a report. Systems should label privilege boundaries so an elevation event is distinguishable from a routine operation, and boundary devices should include rule identifiers that reveal why traffic was allowed or blocked. On the exam, your analysis should prefer fields that make who did what to which thing and what happened next answerable in plain language. That readability is not aesthetic, it makes investigations faster and makes audit trails persuasive. Centralization is the next test, because collection without custody does not satisfy assurance. Logs should arrive at a managed destination where integrity is protected, access is restricted to analysts and auditors with need to know, and retention meets policy and legal requirements. The assessor looks for controls like transport encryption, write once, read many storage, hash chaining or signing for tamper evidence, and role-based access tied to identity groups, not local tool accounts. Evidence might include configuration exports showing forwarding rules, storage policies, and permission sets, along with a sample of integrity verification reports that prove no retroactive edits occurred. In exam framing, recognize that centralize means more than send to a CM. It means the organization can prove that logs reach their destination reliably, remain unaltered, and are retrievable by authorized reviewers long after the incident is closed. Custody is what turns a log into evidence. Alert rules convert raw events into prompts for action, and the PCIP perspective cares about whether those prompts reflect real risks like authentication abuse, privilege changes, and policy violations. A mature set includes failed logins, followed by success from new locations, repeated password resets, creation of new admin roles, changes to multi-factor enrollment, disabled antivirus agents, and modifications to firewall or allow lists near sensitive systems. The assessor expects to see the rule logic, the thresholds, the suppression criteria to avoid alert storms, and the documented mapping from each alert to a response playbook. In evidence form, you want a side-by-side view, the rule definition, an example alert, the ticket created, and the closure notes. On the exam, prefer designs where alert purpose is explicit and testable. Vague rules like notify on errors do not demonstrate intent, and intent is exactly what separates purposeful monitoring from generic log collection. Not every alert deserves the same urgency, so triage must consider severity, asset criticality, and business impact before assigning work. Severity reflects technical danger. Criticality reflects how close the target sits to cardholder systems. And business impact reflects how disruption would harm operations or customers. An assessor expects to see a decision matrix that combines those dimensions into priority codes with target response times, along with examples that show consistent application in tickets. The difference between theory and practice shows up in the queue. Our high-priority incidents actually worked first, and our low-value alerts suppressed or summarized so they do not drown the signal. Exam scenarios often probe whether you understand that triage is a control, not a convenience. If the rules are ad hoc, outcomes depend on who was on shift, which is not defensible. Clear triage keeps the team's attention aligned with risk and makes metrics honest. Escalation is where detection becomes coordinated action, and the PCIP lens evaluates whether handoffs are timely, documented, and unambiguous. A good flow opens a ticket with a timestamp, assigns an owner, references the specific asset and rule that fired, and includes the evidence needed to begin work without logging back into multiple systems. It defines who takes the first containment step, who notifies stakeholders, and who decides on closure, with time-bound checkpoints that prevent languishing cases. An assessor samples incidents to verify that escalations follow the map, that after-hours contacts worked when pages went out, and that communication threads are attached to the same record so the story reads straight through. For the exam, remember that clear, time-stamped handoffs is not jargon. It is how you prove the program functions as a system instead of a collection of heroic efforts that only succeed on a good day. Hunting is the deliberate search for quiet signals that miss thresholds but still matter, and a weekly cadence keeps that discipline alive without overwhelming daily operations. Analysts review denied connection attempts that cluster around certain ports, scan patterns that map to new reconnaissance, slow and low authentication failures, and lateral movement indicators like unusual workstation-to-workstation connections. The assessor asks to see a hunting notebook or knowledge base where hypotheses, queries, and outcomes are recorded, along with the tickets created when a hunt finds something that deserves action. The value for the exam is twofold. Hunting demonstrates curiosity anchored in evidence, and it seeds better alert rules because patterns discovered manually often become automated detections later. A program that hunts shows you it learns. A program that only reacts shows you it drifts. Retention, storage location, encryption, and access reviews transform logging from a transient feed into an auditable archive. Policy should state how long different classes of logs are kept, where they reside geographically or within a cloud tenancy, what encryption protects them at rest and in transit, and who reviews access to the repository. The assessor verifies that actual configurations match the policy and that exceptions are documented with compensating controls. Evidence includes storage lifecycle rules, key management settings, audit reports listing who accessed which logs and when, and records of periodic permission reviews that removed stale writes. For the PCIP exam, remember that retention is not merely about length. It is about ensuring the right records will exist, intact and retrievable when you need to reconstruct a timeline months later. That is how you satisfy both security needs and compliance expectations without debate. Testing detection coverage closes the loop between design and reality. Simulations, whether tabletop exercises, injected log events, red team activities, or scheduled canary actions, demonstrate that rules fire, tickets open, responders move, and closures record learning. An assessor asks for the test plan, the dates executed, the observed gaps, and the remediation tasks that followed, including who owned them and when they finished. Strong programs keep tests small and frequent rather than large and rare, because small tests build reliability and expose drift early. On the exam, select answers that value recorded outcomes over big intentions. A tested, modest rule that prevents a real loss matters more than an ambitious, unproven scheme. Testing proves coverage, and coverage is what makes monitoring a control rather than a promise. Effectiveness is not a feeling. It is a set of sample investigations linked to artifacts and closure notes that anyone can read. Pick recent incidents across categories: authentication abuse, unauthorized privilege change, and boundary policy violation, and show the alert, the correlated logs, the ticket timeline, the containment action, and the root cause note that changed a configuration or a rule. The assessor looks for causality and for the feedback step that prevents recurrence: a new alert, a tightened baseline, or an updated playbook. If closure notes are vague, the control looks cosmetic. If they are specific and trace back to the originating signal, the control looks alive. In exam terms, this is the heart of verification. Can you follow the paper trail from first clue to final fix and see that the organization learned something concrete? If yes, monitoring is doing its job. If no, monitoring is decoration. Noise is the tax you pay when rules are generous and baselines are naive, so improvement requires a steady practice of adding one high-fidelity alert and retiring one noisy rule. High fidelity means a clear hypothesis, tight conditions, and a track record of useful outcomes. Retirement means suppressing, refactoring, or removing a rule that wastes attention. The assessor expects to see a change log where rule additions and removals include rationale, metrics before and after, and any training given to analysts so interpretation remains consistent. Over time, this discipline shifts the environment from reactive fatigue to proactive clarity. Analysts regain trust that red means move now and yellow means tune or verify. For the exam, keep that trait in mind. The quality of detection is measured not by volume but by signal, and signal improves when you deliberately prune. Throughout, remember the PCIP role is to evaluate design and evidence, not to prescribe a particular brand of platform. A good assessment interviews owners for each source category, inspects identity linkage to the log repository, samples time synchronization health, verifies critical fields in actual records, and follows 2 or 3 incidents through triage and escalation to see whether the map matches the terrain. It notes where hunting fed back into rule improvements and where simulations revealed gaps that are now closed, with dates that prove recency. It also checks that access to the logging platform itself is instrumented. Admin actions within the monitoring system leave audit trails because the watcher must be watchable. These habits demonstrate an auditor's mind. Recognize the control, trace the evidence, and judge adequacy against the risk the system carries. It is also worth emphasizing how physical and logical worlds meet in monitoring, because investigations cross those lines frequently. Door controller logs, camera access records, and badge system events often corroborate or refute suspected account misuse or odd login behavior, and the assessor should expect to find correlation fields that make those joins practical. If a privileged action occurs after hours from an internal network, the strongest story shows the network record, the directory event, the host artifact, and the door swipe, or the lack of one, bound by time and identity. When those threads pull together easily, you can answer tough questions quickly. When they do not, the organization guesses, which is dangerous and expensive. The exam rewards that integrative thinking because payment environments are socio-technical and evidence must span both sides. Close with one concrete improvement that proves the program can learn this week. Add a high-fidelity alert that watches for new administrator assignments outside maintenance windows with immediate paging and ticket creation. And retire one noisy rule that fires on generic errors without business context. Record the before and after metrics, alert counts, mean time to respond, and number of actionable cases, and attach the evidence to the change log so others can see the payoff. Small, verifiable steps compound into trust, and trust is what the payment card industry wants organizations to earn through consistent, evidence-backed practice. When monitoring is built with intent and response is disciplined, detection becomes timely, investigations become clear, and the program stands ready to prove its value whenever asked. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.